So I'm Heidi Love. I'm one of your teachers today, and I'm on the Big Island of Hawaii. And the inspiration that brought me here today is that I've lived through this pain myself, and I love to turn my pain into someone else's flashlight.
My name's Timothy Earle. Heidi and I'm saying this, I guess, for two people. The rest of you know, are doing every week a talk on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time that's called Recovery Talk. We're changing the name to, say it, Heidi, I always forget exactly. It's similar.
Oh, real life talk.
Right. Real life talk, just so we can open up the topics a little bit more. But Heidi and I are both people who have learned the hard way about love addiction, love fantasy, codependency, and then we've also done a lot of book learning. And so today is our view on what is love fantasy, what is love addiction, what is codependency, what is interdependent relating, and where are we at in our lives with those things. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Again, Timothy Earle in Maui, and both Heidi and I are love coaches, as well as we both have our private coaching practices. And if you're interested in working with us, you can look us up at Love Coach Academy, or you can find us on Facebook or on the web, Timothy Earle and Heidi Love. Beautiful. Who'd like to go next? Aloha.
Hi, aloha. I'm on Kauai. I thought I'd follow suit with the other islands. I'm Noelani, and basically everything that you said, Timothy, about what this course is about brought me here today. I was very intrigued by the title. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Scott. I just got back home to Hidden Valley Lake late last night after a 10-day road trip, my first road trip since the pandemic. It was really beautiful. I facilitated a wedding a week ago today. And I'm going to listen, but I'm going to turn my camera off, and I'm going to do a few chores, to be honest. I did want to offer, since you guys are changing your title, send me in Facebook Messenger what you want put into the new poster. Let me know which photos you want to use, what your new title is, and if it's 6 o'clock now, as opposed to 5 o'clock. Okay.
And I think Heidi created one, right?
Oh.
I'll send it to him.
Okay. Oh,
yeah, I already had it made. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Send it to me then, so I can so I can promote it for you guys, and have a great class. I will be listening.
Thank you, Scott.
I'm Anna Prabha, also a love coach, and yeah, your new flyer for your shows is really fantastic, Heidi and Tim.
Aw, thank
really,
you.
really, yeah, Heidi, it's brilliant. So good.
Yeah.
Oh no, Lonnie, you have a little heart in back of you. There's kind of a little heart reflection. It's very cute on your kind of corner. No, it looks, like you have a little heart on your shoulder. Yeah. I don't know if you realize, I don't know if it was a reflection or whatever, but it's cute.
I think they're plates.
Are they plates?
Cool. It actually, here, I'll show you.
Just since we're doing love, fantasy hearts, it's nice to have little hearts on your shoulders. How nice is that?
Anna Prabha's in the fantasy.
I love the fantasy.
Oh
yeah. Peace, love, and happiness. Oh,
nice.
Wow. What we all want. What we all want in our relationships. Peace, love, and happiness.
Yeah, it was a Valentine's Day gift from my partner's parents. It's like little doilies and things.
Yeah.
Well, what inspired me to come here today, I have been coming to all the classes, actually. I love them. It's just to put more light on this fantasy, love avoidant, oppositional, like really juicy sort of dynamic that I can have in relationships. Either I'm the love avoidant and the other one is the fantasy, or I'm the fantasy and the other one's the avoidant. And so I'm here to kind of shed more light and more healing into my being around this, so I can have love, peace, and happiness in my relationships.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, I'm David. What do you call it? Interested onlooker. I never know what's going to happen because I don't get any kind of, maybe I'm not on the right list or something, but I did sign up for these classes a few weeks ago. I think inspired by one of the Friday night talks that Scott had with somebody, I forget y'all.
Trish,
Trish, and then I have it in my calendar to do this, but I never know what the topic's going to be or who's on it, and I don't know why that is, but I managed to get here. So I'm also on an island, a very big island, Vancouver Island, approximately 4 times the size of the big island of Hawaii, I think, because I know that because I was driving in the big island and I wanted to see lots of it, and then I sort of figured, well, how big it really is it? I made the mistake of trying to cover too much and not just hanging out and have a good time. But anyway, so yeah, so the topic, I guess, is something to do with love, as it usually is, and I'm here for it.
You're
thank
here for
you.
love.
Yeah.
Welcome, David.
So we got a kitty too. What's the kitty's name before Paul goes? Oh, she's muted. Go ahead, Paul.
This is Muka.
Muka.
I'm
Mookaa.
Luca.
I'm Paul, and right now I wish I was on one of the islands. And I'll probably, I don't know how long I'm going to stay today. I'll probably have my screen up. A lot of, it's like I'm a love coach too, and I'm going through. They say we teach what we need to learn. So I'm in the major part of the lesson right now, and in lots of pain around the loss, and thought it might help, and it might just be real triggering and stimulating. So I'm just I'll see how much I am here, where as long as it's taking care of myself, and when it feels like too much, I'll take care of myself somewhere else. So thank you guys.
Thank you for being
Thanks
so
for being here.
open,
Glad
Paul.
you're here.
Excuse me a minute. I'm just going to go and fill up my coffee.
Great.
I'll take a cup.
Here, Paul. Special delivery. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, no. All
When it
right,
rains, it
Timothy, you
pours.
want to jump in?
Yeah, we'll get going with just a simple mindfulness practice. It's always helpful, I find, when we're in a group setting like this, even on Zoom, to put our feet flat on the floor, unless you're sitting in lotus position, which from what I can tell, most of us are sitting in chairs. So feet flat on the floor, our hands on our knees, either palms up or palms down. Our hands are uncrossed. Our backs are relatively straight, but relaxed. Head stacked on top of the spine. You can close your eyes, I'm going to, or leave them just slightly parted where you can see some light coming in. And if you want to, you can just look straight ahead and use your whole peripheral vision to bring in all your surroundings. But I'm going to close my eyes. And we just begin by breathing in through the nostrils and out through the nostrils, and feeling the sensation of the air as it passes through the nostrils and out through the nostrils at your own pace. Nothing more to do than sense the air moving in and out of the nostrils. And as you do this, you may be aware of some sounds that you hear. That's great. Just pay attention to the sounds. All we're really doing in this level of meditation is noticing, coming to awareness. I just noticed I've got an itch up near my right collarbone. I was about to itch it. I'm just going to let it be there, just sensing it as I breathe in and out of my nostrils. I can hear the birds, mostly roosters, in the background. We can feel the weight of gravity pulling our feet to the floor, our hands to our knees, our sit bones to the chair. And we come back to the sensation of the breath as it moves in and out of our nostrils. Just noticing any thoughts, doing our best to stay out of the thoughts and come back to the breath. Noticing any emotions that are flowing through our bodies. Noticing any physical sensation or pain. Just simply noticing, moving into greater and greater awareness. And our bodies are spread out all over the planet. And yet here we are in this moment together, breathing the same atmosphere in and out. Sitting on the same planet, as far as I can tell. And we're here today to talk about really love, and then to explore these other things that many of us confuse as love. But love, in a quantum field way, is an energy form. In a spiritual way, some call it love is all there is, everything is love. Some people move into we are all one. Some people move into it is a God, it is a creative life force. But today we're going to talk about this force as love. Love knows no bounds. It manifests everywhere. It has no conditions. It has no expectations. It's very much an experience that happens within us. And most of us have learned to look for it externally. And that's where I think we get caught up in love fantasy. Such a great thing. God, I love fantasy and love addiction. Oh, yes. What would I do about that? Oh. I'm just breathing in and out. And then there's these two words, codependency or two statements, codependency and interdependency, which play a role in our relationships, but that's not love. Love addiction, love fantasy is not love. Love is something that is limitless. Everyone has access to it all times, no matter the external conditions. And meditation is one way to move into that peace or that undescribable sensation of love, that overwhelming power of eternal bliss. These are all words to describe the undescribable. Most of us use the word love to indicate that we are in a space that is limitless, abundant, and full of joy. So with that, we're going to just stretch our arms way up over our heads. Maybe relax your jaw, yawn. Oh God, be grateful for these bodies we have that allow us to have these discussions and come into greater and greater levels of awareness. We're each at our own phase. I do not, and neither does Heidi, pertain to know much. We both experienced some things, read some things, and we're doing our best to transmit our learning. And at the same time, I humbly admit I am still working on this thing called love and all of the various distortions that occur as we move down the pyramid, if you will. If love were at the top and we move down, down, down into greater and greater human form and more dynamics and more density and more relationships. Wow, what a beautifully rich game we get to play. And Heidi is going to read us something, I believe. Thank you for meditating with me.
So Timothy and I were discussing what love is. And I think it's one of those things you cannot define. But I remember years ago, I wrote something and I haven't read this in years. So I'm actually kind of curious to read it myself and see where I'm at now as compared to when I wrote it. So I wrote, what love is not something you can control, hold on to, or keep. It is a feeling, an emotion, and then a commitment of action. The act or verb of loving, being responsible to love, and know how to love your loved ones in conscious action that fills them up, thus creating again the feeling of being in love. The loving circle, feel it, be it, do it, and feel it again. It is a space of generosity in which you want to watch, be, and create as much joy as you can when you want to gift your beloved's pleasure out of the sheer joy of being witness to it. I think that's still pretty spot on for me. I think love is a word that's become diluted. Like people say, how are you? And people say, I love you. And to me, it's very empty. And I do believe love is not just a feeling, but I believe that it's how we act in our life. And I think I was inspired to write that by my kids. I've a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old. And when I wrote this, they were younger and they were changing into the teenage phase. And I had to learn how to love them again. How do they receive my love? Because saying I love you isn't enough, in my opinion.
I enjoyed the little reflection about basically having your, in my words, cup overflow with love, right? When we're in such a great state of self-love, self-appreciation, gratitude, and our cup is just overflowing, then we're in a place to really just offer that, as the statement was saying, and in this cycle of giving and receiving and giving and receiving. It's really nice when we're surrounded by other people whose cups are also overflowing. I find that when I was relating in a different way, where my cup was empty or half full and I was looking to others to fill it, I was surrounded by other people whose cups were empty or half full, and we were all trying to get the other to fill us up, and it never really worked very well. In fact, a lot of broken cups, I would say, and having to try to piece them back together. So when we think of being in relationship, I like what Heidi read, that if my cup is overflowing, if I can be in a state of true generosity, then, and I'm willing to receive that same level of generosity from other people, there's a reciprocity and a natural interdependence that occurs. And if someone were to leave, my cup's still overflowing. I'm okay. I may grieve, I may be sad, I may have things come up from my past, but I know I'm okay. Whereas if my cup's half empty and someone's been filling it and then they leave, whoa, I'm going to really have a hard time, because all that love is now in my mind gone. Any other thoughts or reflections from, because it's such a small group, about love?
Yeah, I'm going to be the guy on the other side of the wall, though, because I actually literally just wanted to hang up when I heard that. It's like, it sounds so woo-woo and wonderful, and doesn't sound like, to me, love is such incredible vulnerability. And maybe I'm just in whatever it is, but it's like, the more I love, the more vulnerable I am. And it does, I somewhat like your descriptions, but it doesn't seem like real world at all. Like, when I become a multi-gazillionaire, then money will be easy. To me, love is a fucking hard journey. And if you're if you're you're going to get your heart broken, and it's, like, I hear, if I was only different, then it wouldn't break my heart that my lover's spending 30 days traveling around off into Peru. It wouldn't break my heart, because I'd be so full. And God, I couldn't sleep last night.
Yeah.
I'm full of pain. I'm full of and then what I hear when I hear this is, well, there's something wrong with me. If I was just loving better or different, then I would be just fine.
Maybe
really appreciate you grounding us down, Paul. So I think definitely want to include the whole spectrum. And I am speaking at a pretty lofty level. And I'm not saying that down in the human condition where we are relating with others and getting our hearts broken, that there's anything wrong with that. And I feel, as you say, that vulnerability, being open, being transparent about what's going on with us, that is the key or the doorway or the passage back to a state of self-loving and where our cup again is perceived as full. But it's, if we think of it as like a process that we're in, or a cycle or an exploration of love, I agree. There are times that when we're learning to skateboard, we are down on our knees, blood pouring out, and we don't know what just happened. And it's really difficult to get back up on that and do that again. And next time we try to do it a little bit differently. We try to look at what went, what's ours, what's theirs. And I feel you, if I'm correct, in a process of really just being raw and knowing that you are missing this woman. I'm assuming it's a woman. And you don't, it sounds like there's a bit of like, I have no control here. I have no power. No, she's doing what she's doing. And I'm assuming there's some loneliness and probably self-reflection. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it's sort of like what is it, Japanese art where where they mend the broken pots. But it's like there's a lot of breaking going on in there. I forget what it's called, but
Yeah, with the little gold,
yeah,
where you see the gold lines everywhere.
and it's like I hear, and it's not what either of you probably intended, but I hear like there's this destination of perfect self-love, and then when you do that, you're never going to feel like you got hit by a truck again. So it's like, if I think of that, I say, oh, I'm in the wrong class today. So
So I want to
And
jump in here because I think there's no separation in what anybody is talking about personally. I think that when we are full of love, as I heard Timothy talk about, that it has nothing to do with not feeling heartbroken or pain, but everything to do with what we're teaching today. Because when we're in an addictive state or we're in a love fantasy state and we need the other to survive, that's the difference that I would talk about. But loving is a whole picture of grief and heartbreak and pain and pleasure and joy and connection. And I don't think, I've never met anyone that can just feel love and no pain. I think if you really love somebody, of course things are really going to hurt. If you don't love them, it doesn't hurt. So I'm absolutely with you, Paul. And then it brings up withdrawal too, because a love addict and withdrawal feels very different than someone who is not a love addict and is not in withdrawal. So maybe we'll touch on that a little bit and you guys can self-identify in if there is any self-identification with that. But I've experienced grief in a state of grace and love and pain and heartbreak. And I've also experienced grief in my love addiction, which is more like withdrawing from heroin. And it really, really sucks. And they're very different, each very painful, but very different.
And I think the only way to the cup being overflowing, or the only way to being in the seat of love, which is not what when we're in relationship or we've lost someone, this is a relationship. We're practicing loving, but it's not actually love. This is my view. But the only way back to fully experiencing the state of love again is through the pain, is through whatever is happening right now. So there can't not be any bypass. I'm not making an argument for bypassing. I'm making an argument for going more and more into it. And what I see, Paul, is you're really being vulnerable and authentic and truthfully in your experience. You're not trying to bypass it. You're not trying to maybe some nights you're eating a lot of popcorn and watching Netflix, which is probably good. You need a break.
Little ice
so,
cream.
yeah, so we all need a little break, you know. If we can stay out of the alcohol and some of the other things, we're probably better off. But I've done all of that, so no shame in any of that either. So I'm trying to just bridge between this like esoteric kind of concept of love that can be an experience for many, and this kind of earthly thing that we're doing, which, yeah, our hearts are getting broken, and we've got parents that did things to us, and we've got traumas, and some of us less, and we're working through all of these things, I think, ultimately to come to a greater and greater state of actual love. But that's my view. I'm not trying to put that on anyone. Anyone else a view of love? I'm really enjoying the discussion, by the way. So I'm kind of just throwing away the notes a little bit. And it's quite intimate. It's very nice.
Well, I remember asking this question of my teenage girlfriends. I think we're like 12 at the beach. and I really did. I was laying on the beach with my 12, 13, they're probably like 13, and growing up in this really toxic alcoholic family situation. And I had this like, what is love? This koan came, and I was like, I asked them like, what is love? It just was this pure question. And they just kind of like laughed, I mean, there was no answering back. And I realized I still have this question. It has been with me, throughout my life. And I must say, having children, I really discovered love, really feeling an unconditional love to them and just their love back to me. And that was a huge, deep healing. And but within relationships, I've been in many like really loving relationships. And there's been in me this quality of not, when there is all this love there, of not really being able to let it in somewhere, a fear of letting it go in too deep, thinking I'm in it, and like just the chemistry wise, like sex was hugely important in this whole dynamic, the chemistry was kind of everything. Love was almost secondary in some ways, if that makes any sense. It's like, okay, if we got great chemistry, we're in love, sort of, And that was kind of a go-to. And back in the day, and not really going into this whole vulnerability around what's going on for me inside, and the emotions, and this fear of being abandoned, or this fear of going in so deeply into love and then not being reciprocated, or somehow that person leaving. And I have seen myself in this fantasy aspects at times, and then being with an avoidant, and my nervous system just always being kind of like this, like, where your etheric field is, my nervous system just being so hyper alert all the time, right? And somewhere that, to this day, this energy, this hyper alertness is with me, and is with me in almost every relationship, male, female, I'm always on, what kind of on watching, like, when's a shoe gonna drop? Is this real? Is this not real? Is this gonna, I just never really get to fucking relax in it, Yeah.
Thank you, Anupama. David or Noelani?
Let me think. Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I had a sort of very intense love and loss experience many years ago, 50 years ago. And it was part of a whole crazy, literally, I went psychotic, and that was part of it. I'm not saying it was the whole thing. I went into a severe manic episode with a young woman but there was an aspect of that early on about having my cup filled by this person. So, and then like, I mean, and then through Facebook a couple of years ago, through, she contacted me because I had sort of touched base on Facebook with this old college friend of mine, and who was from that era in our lives. And all of a sudden I got this friend request. And I'm telling you, I like here, we're talking, you know, close to 50 years, 40, 45 years or something like that. And like, I got this immediate emotional reaction, you know, it was quite interesting to me. And that's all I can say. And then I think of, you know, having a child, my daughter, and then the grandchildren. That's different. And now the grandchildren are kind of growing up. One's 10 and one's 14. And I just spent some time with them yesterday. I had a great time. Played pool with them in the basement of their house. Took them out for lunch. But it's kind of it's definitely changing. And I mean, they're not as interested in us anymore. You know, we don't see them as much. There's a bit of sadness and recognition with that. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Mhm. I definitely feel the other story that you talked about deeply. These rare anomalies that we assign the word love to, that are in a relationship form and that end or explode, or we begin to behave, as Rilke says, in one of the four psychotic ways, or two or three or all four of the psychotic ways, because we're under such pressure and our hearts are breaking, and we can become manic, or in my case, we can become very avoidant and hurtful. And so as you were speaking, I have that feeling, and I thought of this one person. If they messaged me, I think my heart rate would go from 0 to 99 in like a half second. Thank you for sharing that.
I'll share. So I have a love of a lifetime. It's been such a beautiful, painful, tragic, amazing up and down roller coaster of a journey. We met when I was 10 and he was 13, and he's always lived here on the island of Kauai, and I always lived on the mainland, and we have family, not blood family, but Ohana extended family connection. And we just have this deep soul connection. And it's been this incredible saga of love and rendezvous and other people in between. And I guess essentially what I want to say is that, touching upon the love fantasy part, is that I realized that's a lot of what I had, a lot of the relationship, because he always lived here and I always lived, 5,000 miles away. And we have the soul connection, we have the love, yet because we were in two different parts of the world, for me, there was this fantasy of who he is, what it is like to be with him on a regular basis, what it's like to be in relationship, what it would be like to build family and all these things. And so my mind, because it couldn't experience on a tangible level, put him up on this pedestal and built all this fantasy around who he is and what he means and how I'm in relationship to that, and kind of built this identity and around that. And so then fast forward many years later, I move here to the island of Kauai about 3 years ago. And reality kicked in, and it was like, whoa, okay, so it was like breaking down the fantasy and realizing that some of what I was experiencing in my head was not what I was experiencing in the reality of it, and how painful that was. And, you know, I think I'm still doing that, kind of just chipping away a little bit at some fantasies. But what I'm getting in the same time is the emergence of the real him. And as painful as it is in some ways to have been like, oh wait, you're not this like mythical perfect lover, you're a human with, you know, I don't want to call them flaws because they're also perfect, but with things that trigger me. And you know, it was like a cosmic bitch slap. But it's been, what I've gotten on the other end of it is just so much incredible beauty, because we're learning to love. We have that deep soul connection. So we're learning to love each other through our flaws, not flaws, again, through our pains, our traumas, right? And emerging is just this incredible extension of connection and appreciation, and ultimately creating and actively creating our love connection, our love affair, our soul mateship. So it's been really beautiful and intense and painful and tragic at times. But yeah, I wanted to come here today because I really identified with the fantasy part of it. I went, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what you will have to offer here today. So thanks for letting me take the floor for a bit.
Yeah, no, Lonnie, thank you for sharing. I think it's just a beautiful segue into our material, because you just described what I would name. I love to name things. Some people hate labels. I love them. I say name it to tame it. But you just described recovery to me, like having a recovered relationship experience, and where we can go from fantasy and then in a non-coherent way, someone could go into hating the other person, being resentful and sad and heartbroken, all the feelings that we go through anyway, but also blaming them for not living into your fantasy. And Timothy, when we got inspired to do this talk, we talked about how does fantasy get in the way of you actually loving someone. And so you basically described the recovery of going through the grief, the heartbreak, because that is a loss of a dream, an ideal, a fantasy. And so we go through that loss, the grieving process, and then learning to love into acceptance of what is, and where can we meet, and how can we, you know, come together in this love that is reality.
And in between, there was all of that resentment too. I mean, tragic love affair, but I mean, so worth fighting for. Totally awesome. Thank you.
Beautiful.
I definitely will use that you received a cosmic bitch slap. Thank you for that. I would not have put all those words together, and when you said that, I looked at it and went, oh yeah, that's what that was. That relationship that mirrors what you were talking about for me in a little bit different way was a real big awakening or cosmic bitch slap to myself. My love fantasy has shown up as this idea that I'm going to find someone who loves me exactly the way I need them to love me every moment at all times, and never make any mistakes, and be perfectly in love with me no matter what mistakes I make. And I'll have absolute freedom at all times. And the list goes on. It's an absolutely ridiculous, I think somewhat young adult, juvenile, somewhere in there in my stage of development, projection onto the other person. as I've gotten bitch slapped for having that love fantasy, I've come to recognize that everyone gets to do love and live life in the best way that's for them. And that it's important for me to discern, do my core values and principles align with this other person? And can we commit and co-create something where I get to be me and they get to be them? I don't expect them to love me fully, and I don't have to love them fully, but we are committed to loving each other as we are, working with each other, communicating. And this becomes a lot more grounded, a lot less castles in the sky, and more like, okay, brick and mortar. Where's the next rock? All right, here we go. We're building a wall, or we're building a nice little garden or something. So I really appreciated your story immensely. And I also see love fantasy when I work with clients in man meets a woman. And immediately on the first date, he's saying, I want to marry you, right? He's projecting this fantasy that he has, and he's doing it on every woman he dates. It's not just one. And it's coming out of loneliness. It's coming out of that cup being half empty. And it's coming out of this idea that by being married, it's a love fantasy, I will be complete, I will be whole, everything will be okay. That's not reality, right? As you're encountering in your relationship, you're working every day really hard on these things. And I've also seen people who are so longing for something that there's this projection of a childhood fantasy or a movie fantasy or something they didn't have when they were growing up in their family origin, or they want what their parents had. And there's a projection outward, as opposed to just really discerning, who am I? What do I want? And does this person that I'm relating with, are we a good match? And this is a very different approach to building a relationship than what I did for years, which was just project and throw myself into these love fantasies, which often became codependent and turned into love addiction. And then that's when things often got really supercharged or messy.
I want
'Cause
to
if I
jump
look-
in
Yeah, go
here
ahead.
whenever you're done. The one way I want to share that I experienced it, and then I want to talk about extremes, is that in love fantasy, there was a projection on the person, like much like Timothy's talking about his client, of this is what I want. And when I met somebody I was attracted to, I dreamt into they are that, when they really weren't that, because in that stage of my life, they're very non-coherent people I was picking. And then going through the anger and blame and grief around that. But I also want to talk on the other side, because I've also been black and white, right? Of I can't have any of that, so I settle for this. And so there's a middle ground, of course, of, are we on this end of, I don't believe that I can have what I want, so we're not trying, and we're avoidant, or we're with people that are just not what we want at all, and we think we have to do that to have love. That's like we're here. And then there's the everybody that I want to be with is my ultimate fantasy, and when they're not, I'm pissed, right? Those are like extremes. And then somewhere we live in the middle, where we believe in what we want, we know our ideals, and it doesn't mean we can't have that fantasy or vision. I mean, the fantasy, when I use that word, is more the addictive quality of not looking at reality. In no way am I saying we can't have what we truly want, and that there's huge value in discovering what we're in alignment, discovering what we want in a partner, and then taking the actions to have that, either in a new partnership or in the partnership we're in. I mean, I really believe in matching our relationship visions. So I want to be careful not to say, you can't have what you want, because absolutely are our actions, are the way we're living meeting our ideal? Are we living into that? Are we showing up in a way that we can achieve that? And then are we in reality of what the other person is capable of? And I think that's more what we're talking about in love fantasy, is one, are we available and showing up in the way we would want someone else to? And two, are they capable or willing? That's a hard lesson that I learned in my marriage that I have left, is that he wasn't capable or willing. And I don't know which one. It's not for me to judge. He was either incapable or he was unwilling. I don't know which. But, and not judging him for being there, but looking at that wasn't a fit for me and allowing that to be okay.
Can I say
Yeah,
one?
go ahead, Paul.
And today I'm just going to be the triggered guy, so I'm going to embrace my role here. But it's like, I want to be careful of, we're sold the fantasy from the time we're little kids, and I almost feel like we're now being bitch slapped for actually believing what we're taught to believe.
Yeah.
Versus treating it with such compassion. Of course we want that fantasy. Of course we want that person to love us unconditionally. Of course, you know, and it's how to be compassionate rather than beating myself up for wanting to be loved like that and
Yeah.
wanting to love like that. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, you know, the only thing it's of course we've been sold Cinderella, Prince Charming, and then on a prophet, something you said about waiting for the other shoe to fall. I'm like, I can relate, sister, because that's how my relationships have been. Fantasy, waiting for the shoe to fall. Like, you know, and hard to find that middle ground of being with someone with their faults and being with my faults and going, oh, you know, because I just have gone through this. We had 3 weeks, we got back together, 3 weeks of real bliss and 1 week of hell. And then it's like, which one do we choose? Oh, well, it must mean the hell must mean we're not meant to be together, or the bliss was we're meant to be together, and it's always supposed to be that way. And it's like, oh, I realize I have some beliefs that are painful and causing me challenges, and like, I want to be really gentle and compassionate with myself right now. So
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just want to I don't know, appreciate that, because those of us coming out of really toxic families, you know, and we are so fucking hard on ourselves, man. I mean, we just can't do it good enough, well enough, perfect. We are so put ourselves on such a high fucking pedestal. And it's just really, so just, wow, yeah, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You know, and I mean, I'm doing the best I can. Like, I'm feeling scared right now. You know, just finding a safe place for us to be, even with ourselves, is challenging. So just, I appreciate the gentleness, bringing that to the forefront, you know, of how to be compassionate and gentle with our fragile heart, you know, because when our hearts get hurt, there's a reason people stay alone after they've been, you know,
Well, and
Oh.
and get a
as-
few cats and
yeah.
just saying.
And then they have a relationship with a dog, right? This is me. That's like kind of like the relationship they left, but that damn dog cannot leave, right?
Right.
So, you know, the
Yeah.
dog looks at me like, today, or am I going to get slapped, or am I going to get fed? What's happening with Timothy today? I'm
We'll see
kidding
if
a
we
little
just
bit.
kept each other on chains. That would be great.
But I
You can't
wanted,
get away. You're on a leash.
I do want
With an
to
adorable collar, you know.
That was for
Yeah.
you, Paul. That was just kidding.
thank you. That's it. This is a different call.
Yes. I do want to come to what Paul's talking about, and that's, there's an innocence, right? To the love fantasy, there's an innocence. I mean, I went through it. It's like still dealing with it, you know, still there, but there's this longing for this movie that I created at 5 and then rewrote it at 7 and then improved it at 13. And then, you know, and you've got Disney Channel, mom and dad getting divorced, dad having lots of different partners, mom choosing none. You've got the church, you've got pornography, Playboy at the time, you've got the first girlfriend, you've got junior high, you've got all these layers of things coming in, shaping this fantasy that I had. And it went through many evolutions. And then you do the marriage, I did, and make the vows till death do us part, and you have children. And one day after 17 years, just the universe rips that carpet out from underneath you. And the next thing you know, you're upside down in the ground and you don't know how to get out. And there's no rushing that process, I don't think. I'm glad I went and saw a therapist and got support, but I'm still grieving the loss of that mother and that family dynamic. And when I look at the cyclical aspects in my life, I don't know about any of you, it's like the universe's Facebook. It's winking at me every 10 years. It's showing me a photograph or a replication of what I went through as a kid. So example, my dad's dad dies when he's 11, leaves him. My dad leaves me when I'm 9. I leave my daughter when I'm 9, when she's 9. I get involved with another woman who has a 9-year-old. I leave her, it ruptures. He's not, it's like, what? And each journey or each try, there was this real longing to make it work, and this real big, oh, this is it. This is it. And what I notice in me is, I'm 55, so until 51 or 52, God, I feel like I'm a slow learner. You talk about that feeling of, I come from a family that was difficult, and I'm really hard on myself, and I'm really hard on other people. And that gets in the way of me being in a relationship. But the fantasy that I kept trying to act out, not until I was 51 did I begin to go, okay, wait a minute. I'm not actually slowing down and discerning. Sexuality has got a huge pull on me. I will admit that there's even compulsive sexual behavior there. So when the chemistry there is there, like Anna Prabha talked about, I'm all in. I got my backpack. I'm moving in, right? After one day of relating with someone. I'm exaggerating it to make it clear. So I think we're all on this journey of trying to figure out, where are we innocently involved in some form of love, fantasy, love, addiction, which can be very unconscious because we've been growing up in it and in this culture that promotes it everywhere we go. And is there anything wrong with it? No, not really. There's a beautiful, beautiful, innocent longing to, be in committed romantic lovership with another person. And as Anna Prabha said so beautifully, to know that we don't have to wait. We don't have to be anxious and waiting for the shoe to drop. We can actually take the shoes off and go lay down by the fire and just relax. And is that a love fantasy? I don't think so. I think there's some actual possibility there, but it does, I believe, in my own work, require really loving Timothy and being willing to do all the work that all of us are doing, which is communicate, check in with each other, check our fantasy at the door. And as Paul was kind of indicating, like, enjoy the 3 weeks of bliss, go through the week of hell, and try and see if we can't find somehow this middle ground that is more realistic. And as I've done this, I do have to say, like, the relationship I have is the best relationship I've ever had, but it's not, it doesn't fulfill my love fantasy and my love addiction. It fulfills other things. It's way more grounded. And there are days that my love addict and my love fantasy goes, I want that. And I forget to look at, like, oh, wow, I'm so grateful for what I have. So good. It's so fucking good. I've never had it like this, And to accept, as Noelani was saying, the reality of this person in front of me, and to work with them, and to try not to lose myself in the relationship, and to try not to let her lose herself in the relationship, and have this interdependent relating, which for both of us is highly dependent on our spiritual practices and on God, and then choosing to be together. But it's taken 51 years and the verdict is still out. The shoe might drop, right? It's only been a short period of time that we've been relating, like 4 years now. And in my book, that's I was in marriage for 17 years, so 4 years is still very young to me. In the Bay Area, 4 years is a lifetime. Anybody else?
I in doing work with people, often I will have them do a resentment inventory. And when I did that work myself, one of my long-standing resentments that showed up on many lists was Disney movies. And that idea that Paul brought up, that we're taught from such a young age of this perfect hero and, princess and king and all this perfect love. And I am a very idealistic, go for your dreams, don't settle, because I have been a person that has settled. And I believe that there's a lot of skill where we can match our vision. And so I, again, want to really separate that. There's like an addictive quality of being in love fantasy and having unrealistic expectations. And there's knowing what is our vision, what is our fantasy, and how can we coherently get there. And I guess the way I want to explain that is with needs. When I can relate this to addiction because I'm a recovered addict. When I drank or used drugs or reached out, that would be a strategy to meet a beautiful need. I wanted to slow down. I wanted comfort. I wanted to check out. I needed my brain to stop. Whatever the need wasn't bad, but my strategy was not life enhancing. And that's kind of, I think, what we wanted to bring to you guys today is what the beautiful need of our ideal, or that wonderful loving relationship, is a wonderful need, and it's wonderful to go towards. And are we doing it in a strategy like drinking alcohol that might be life depleting? Not that drinking alcohol for all of you is life depleting, but I'm using it in that regard. Or are we doing it in a way that's hurting us with the denial fantasy goggles on of who the person is or what they're capable of at that moment? And are they a fit for us? Are we not looking at the reality of it? And so, are we moving into the relationship in coherent, what I would call sober behaviors, or are we triggered in our non-coherence? And when I hear something like Paul sharing, I have no idea what you went through, but I'm thinking of my own like blissful weeks and then really coherent weeks or hell weeks. And then I look at what were the lead-in behaviors that took me into hell. So like self-identifying, what are our behaviors we know bring connection? What are our behaviors that bring disconnection? Where do we get triggered where, and again, I could apply it to an addict, that once you pick up something, you keep going with it. Have you ever in the relationship, like David mentioned, gone off the rails in behavior that is just not you? And that's like kind of picking up and then you can't stop, or text bombing somebody, or getting in a match where it just can't stop. And then the next day you're like, shit, why did that happen? What went wrong? And so I do believe we can self-identify. Like I have a whole list of behaviors that I know take me into codependency, or take me into more of a love avoidant or love addict. And again, I love labels, not labeling you. For me, it helps me identify where I can show up coherent and where I'm showing up non-coherent. And I know what things to stay away from, or I know to call Timothy and be like, okay, I'm starting down this behavior. I just need to tell on myself. And then it stops it in its tracks because it's not a sober relationship behavior for me. And so I would love for, us to look at where can we identify where we know that our reaction or trigger to someone else is ours, and how we cope with that can either be coherent or non-coherent, that can take us down a path. Like, can you guys identify something that is not coherent for you, that if you just stayed away from that behavior for yourself, it might help any relationship?
That's a question to anyone in the group.
Yeah.
The way I frame it is, when I look at my relationships that have all gone bad, there's one common denominator. And that doesn't mean the other half doesn't have their things, but I have had to look at, where am I choosing to be really owning my own things and bringing accountability to myself and my own growth, that's more coherent relating, or where am I blaming the other, using some sneaky is my thing, like go underground, hide something to get my unmet need met, whether it be sexual or whether it be in the heart or whether it be some other way. And that's where I get incoherent, sorry. Coherent meaning the areas where I'm really owning my stuff, because that's all I can really do. Incoherent where I'm often like nitpicking, blaming, judging, doing some kind of vice in order to get my need for connection, it's usually that, or acceptance met. So anybody have an example?
Well, I have one that I'd like to do less of, which is taking my other partner's behavior personally. That just because they're wanting to do their journey and need to have a breakthrough in their life and they're going to be gone for 30 days, it's like, it's so easy for me to think it's a direct attack on me. So how do I not take my partner's behavior personally? That would
Can we
be
go the other way first, Paul? Can I ask a question?
sure.
So facts, right? She's doing some kind of self-exploration in Peru for 30 days. And there's a possibility of, oh, she's rejecting me, or she doesn't want to be with me, or I'm not important, right? There's these possibilities over here. If you move into those possibilities, what ends up happening? You've had enough relationships where this maybe has occurred, even outside of romance. What ends up happening for you if you adopt all those, yeah, it's me, nobody wants me, she's leaving me? What ends up being the result of that?
A lot of my life. I don't,
Right. So what ends up happening?
well, my behavior, see, I end up being less and less resourceful and more reactive.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then I, oh, well, boy, here I am with the cliches, but when I take it personally, I make it personal.
Right.
Which,
In most cases, when I've done what you're talking about, or I'm thinking of this friend of mine that I'm trying to help right now.
yeah, that's me too. I'm trying to help a friend. It's like,
right. Well,
I'm fine.
I'm thinking of this specific person it relates. She is believing that she's going to get excluded. Going into the relationship, she's convinced she's going to get excluded. Everybody's trying to reassure her, no, we would never do that to you. And then she starts behaving in ways that make people not want to be around her. She takes everything personally. She gets really defended. And pretty soon, all those people who said, no, I would never do that to you, are like, God, I just can't be around her anymore. And it's this self-fulfilling prophecy because she's taking things personally and she's looking for that. And I hear a little bit of that in what you're talking about, where it's a challenging situation. And if you move into blaming yourself, the result is you end up getting isolated. And I'm imagining that. And if we go the other way, yeah, what tools, or how do we go the opposite direction of, this isn't about me?
Can I answer what I do when that happens?
Yeah. I was going to say, anybody have any ideas? Because I think we all get in this same predicament that Paul gets in, right? I know I do.
Let me
oh, do you want to jump in first, Paul?
Just for 2 seconds. So Timothy, I can clearly see it, like, and that's the demon, between my two shoulders. Like, I can see on one side, I want to text the text from hell, that basically it's like, man, you're bad, stupid, and wrong. And let me point out all of the ways you suck.
Great strategy, right?
Yeah, it's bonding.
Good.
And that's why
Can I write that down? I'm going to write that down.
and that's why I love you and want more of you. So I'm just
and can't live without you.
right, because you are such an ass. So I'm just, and I just want to embrace that side of me because it's so, oh my God, it's so tempting. I really had to like watch my fatal fingers wanting to type out terrible text. Oh, that could be a little rap song when you want to type out a terrible text. All right, now I'm ready to be healed, Heidi.
Can I say
Thank you.
something?
That's a lot of pressure, Paul.
Yeah, David, go ahead. Thank you, Paul, for practicing just being with it, right? Rather than trying to fix it or change it, like just noticing it. Just such a beautiful modeling of that. Thank you.
And I think that that is the big difference between coherent and non-coherent behavior. Like I was saying, are we doing lead-in behavior that we're trying to get a need met and we're doing it with a strategy where they're going to reject us more, they're going to not come closer, when really I hear Paul's heart saying, I need to know I'm loved. I need to know I'm so significant that you wouldn't go on the trip if I really didn't need you to, because I'm so loved. And I can so relate to that. I've had lots of different relationship experience, and some I would call non-toxic and easy and not triggering my addictive crap. Sorry, I'm cussing a lot today, but and then I am in one now where I love the person madly, and madly I put with quotations because it triggers all my addictive patterns or all my childhood wounds. And I'm like Paul. So we're in the question of like, what do we do when we feel like reaching out and saying, you're hurting me, this is what's happening, I'm not important. And so for myself in this time, I am being that super slow down, compassionate, what part of me is arising? You know, is it the little part of me that got beliefs as a child of, you know, if I'm not perfect, I'll be abandoned. I'm not important is one of my biggest buttons. And all the evidence in the world shows me I'm not important when I take it personal, right? And so I have to be with that part of me. I can't abandon that part of me. But if I act on that part of me in relationship, I never get the response I want. Never, ever works, damn it. But if I can be with me and get support from somebody else that I know I can safely call and say, hey, I need to know I'm important. I need to know I'm loved and I need to be coddled right now. I can't get that from my partner right now because they're not going to show up in my reaction, you know.
That's when Heidi calls me often.
Timothy, tell me I'm worthy of being loved and I'm a good partner.
And you do it well, and you do it well. I'm proud of. You remind me to do that for myself. Every time you do it, it's really a gift to me. You know, so thank you.
Because I know that the behavior I'm going to react in isn't going to get the result I want. So I need to not hate myself for being triggered into that behavior. And I think Paul's brought that up a lot today, like that really tender self-compassion of being truthful for where we're at and that there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. We can't deny it away. But how are we going to show up in our relationship with it? Can we pause and get support long enough to look at what are we really wanting when we reach out to our partner? What is the intention of the communication? And can we get into a space of self-sourcing where we can really just ask for what we need, when we can get to the basics and be like, I'm just using you as an example, Paul. I'm not saying this is the right thing, but when we can get with our partner and say, you know, there's a part of me that feels so sad, and I wish you would just be willing to stay home, and that's way less important, and I'm the most important thing in your life, and I need, you know, maybe this, and this, and it would really help me embrace the fact that what you're doing has nothing to do with me, but you could take care of me in these ways, and I want to support you in your time away and your this and that. And again, I'm not saying that's the solution for Paul, but an example of being with both, because neither are wrong, and we can't ignore that part of ourselves. But how do we act? How do we show up in loving ourselves and the other? And when we go down a non-coherent road, like maybe sending that text, we get hurt. And that's when we know it's non-coherent and coherent behavior. Like we're not inviting being supported, we're inviting being attacked or being rejected, or you know, we're living out the dark side of our fantasy of like, yeah, the other shoe dropped. Yeah, I'm not important. Yeah, this person is shit. I
You think
knew
I'm
it.
not?
I knew it. And it's
Just
really
to-
hard not to take things personal when we're in love with somebody, and everything is personal. It hurts, but they did not install our buttons.
The difficult work that Paul started talking about and Heidi's continuing, I just want to break it down real quick, is wow, I am in chaos, or I am effed up right now, or I am hurting, or however you identify that, and not to do anything, right? Paul's like, oh, I really want to send this text and da 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 da, but I'm not going to do that because I'm hurting. Something's going on. And then to be able to look inward and source, when else have I felt this way? And usually you'll have 5 memories flood you, and you just let them come. Oh, what beliefs have I adopted based on all those memories? Oh, yeah, this would be the worst thing for me to do. If I were to do this, I'm recreating what's occurred before. I'm going to just keep sitting with it. I'm going to keep looking at where else it's come from in my life, if it has, sit and feel the unfelt feelings. Then I think we do get down to the need. What is the need? Then we get to where Heidi's talking about, where we can actually ask a friend or a support person, or possibly if we're resourced enough and our partner's resourced enough, we can come from that vulnerable place of, I have these needs, they're not being met, it's triggering me into these belief systems that are mine, and I'm wanting to lash out. I'm not going to. I really hope you have a wonderful 30 days. I'll see you when you get back. I mean, that's like a tall order, but we can't get there without kind of going down inward and coming to those needs in that way and being able to articulate those needs and that vulnerability in a self-resourced way, where we're not kind of doing it in a nice psychological way, and then at the same time we're throwing in all the hooks at the end and trying to pull them back into the dynamic. So, but
I
you
just
wanted to
wanna
say something earlier,
throw-
David.
Yeah, okay, so what triggered me, not triggered in a strong emotional sense, but I was quite intrigued by the use of the word excluded and the need for belonging. And I have a friend who recently has been part of a group of men that I've been involved with for quite a few years, and we've gone on the odd wilderness trip, and these men have gone on more of them than me. And the one guy has a disability, and it's getting worse as he got older. Right? He had a brain injury when he was a young man in a bar fight, actually. He was in a coma for several months, but he's a really great guy. He writes poetry, and he's just a trooper, you know. And there we went on and then now 2 occasions the last couple of years, like he's got really triggered about not being included in these relatively demanding wilderness trips, or demanding for a guy of his disability anyway. And man, did he ever get triggered by it? And now his wife just died 6 weeks ago or so, and he is um, quite devastated by it. And I'm thinking, like, for one thing, he's quite dependent on her now physically because his disability, and also emotionally. I like when I look at it, he had married into she had three basically young teenage daughters when he married her, and they've been very supportive of him. I don't know anything about the previous husband, but I guess he fulfilled a pretty good need for the daughters and vice versa. And I just like I've really noticed how kind of dependent he is, you know. And I'm thinking back to my experience that I shared earlier was when I think back on it, this woman or girl, I mean, I was at a state when I was kind of lonely and depressed, I guess, and there was a whole circle of friends in that I inherited, I came into, um, and I just had a really great couple of years. And so it was not just a lot, there was the loss of her, but there was this kind of whole scenario in her family, and that was like my father committed suicide in that scene, and she had a family that was very functional. Her father was a prominent surgeon, and they had lots of money and cottage and skiing and all this kind of stuff. So there was this whole kind of environment, that and this whole idea of exclusion. I think anyway, I'm just rambling, but that's what I
No,
came to.
you're kind of talking about two different forms, right? And we'll come back to what we were talking about in a second, but
So I was
two
thinking of
different-
Paul, okay, and Paul, and like she's going on this great ship, and he's kind of excluded from it. That's yeah.
And yet, I just want to really come to your friend, this man that was in your men's group, who's got a physical disability, right? That's getting worse, it sounds like. And
Yeah.
and that, I think that's almost sometimes when we have physical experiences that are going on, cancer in my case, or we can begin to feel really isolated and excluded, and we're wanting to be included. Sometimes we don't know how to reach out and ask for it, and sometimes we're just kind of isolating, laying back and seeing who will reach out to us, and people aren't reaching out to us. And so I think as we get closer and closer to not being able to take care of ourselves physically, it gets even worse. So this is a real particular type of case you're talking about, where he's probably feeling realistically dependent on others. And when he's excluded, it's really, really hurting him, because he's having to face that, he can't do that hike really. Whereas your scenario with the young woman, or in Paul's case right now, I think we have a lot more agency over these things. Doesn't mean it's not difficult, but it's more agency than when I lose all my limbs. I'm going to be more dependent on others, and probably that's going to have that feeling of exclusion, but it's a very different kind of thing. So my empathy goes to your friend, and this time in his life, losing his wife as well. And then my empathy in my heart goes to all of us that get caught up in doing things that get us the result that we don't want, because we're hurting, rather than really coming, as Paul's showing us, into just, all right, I'm just going to hurt, and I'm going to sit here. And then, as Heidi pointed out, I'm going to ask for support from people who can give it to me, and see if I can't just mine and look at what's here for me to learn in this hurt. On a problem.
Yeah, that's powerful, David, to what you're sharing. I feel it is very universal. It is this, it's cellular, it's DNA, it's survival, is the tribe, is having this tribe, having friends, and like what you're talking about, David, this friend, not only was this connection with her, but it was with the family, extended family, the friends, the connections. And the more connections and friends and support we have in our lives and people around us, it's easier is then to maybe break up with somebody or change a partner if we have this support system, of friends and family. The Buddha field, when I lived in India, in a situation where there's a lot of friends and a lot of connections, if a relationship wasn't working out necessarily, there was pain, it hurt, but there was a lot of support. The support is so huge, and this vision, like, okay, this is, there's friends and other connections. And, now during this time of COVID, we are also have been very isolated. We are kind of have been in our own little islands, very devoid of human contact a lot, And I think there's been a lot of depression, a lot of suicide, a lot of stuff going on because we don't have our tribe necessarily with us. And that, that makes it really challenging. It's important, I think, to really have, make an effort to have this friends around, or support system, having to reach out and, and so I totally relate to that, what you're saying, David. and how painful it is. You know, when you break up with somebody, then their whole tribe, you don't have them as well. You know, I had a situation with my family after this, my stepfather passed. And I am kind of like this considered, you know, this proverbial black sheep, just because I, you know, meditate, don't drink, and try, you know, one of those.
Really bad person. That's what, yeah.
Really?
Oh, you have all these abhorrent behaviors.
Very suspicious character I am. And, you know, I just get this feeling that since that stepfather was the last of a placeholder of a connection with a certain DNA crew, I was getting this feeling of really being rejected, not included. And it really put me in this childhood wound again of not being accepted, including, and I think it brings up the survival that we have from DNA. When we were kicked out of a tribe, meant death. So we go to that DNA survival, you know, means death, right? So
I think this brings up such an important thing too, in the spirit of being tender with that part of us that needs something that, and I experienced this with my children, especially my little one. She has very high expectations and she'd get super let down if they weren't met. And that's a part of us, right? If we want this and we're not getting it. That I found with her indulging the fantasy, not as if it was going to happen, but not dismissing that part of ourselves. And I can relate to that story, not in the same way, but when I quit drinking, my whole family drank, and my brothers were my best friends, and we used to camp and make beer, and that was our whole lifestyle. And when I got sober, they quit inviting me, and I was crushed. And I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go be around all that. I have a totally different lifestyle now, but I wanted to be invited. And I think that's that part of us, that it's okay to still invite, or it's okay to indulge the fantasy and be like, I just want to know that I would love to have you on this trip. And if I could carry you on my back right now, I so would, because it would make all the difference if you were here with us. Just, you know, that there's nothing wrong with needing to hear that, even if the answer is we can't do it.
Yeah, or
I want to
think
be
of-
included.
I think I had this vision of all the men that went camping coming by his house afterwards with his permission, and like showing him
Yeah.
pictures or telling him about the trip, and really
Yeah, well, yeah, it was interesting. He got really triggered about like not being the last one, not being included in the planning of it. He should have been included in the planning of it. Well, you know, and me being the supporting type, sort of bought into that, and one of the other guys got a bit upset with me and said, I mean, it was like, you know, totally, because if the last one that he went on was up in Haida Gwaii, you know, and it was pretty rigorous kayaking, and it was kind of a disaster. He
Yeah.
was it was made the little trip very difficult. So,
Yeah.
but I was the one. I mean, I'll just tell you, we've gone and we've had this group that meets once a month, and we've done it on Zoom for a year now. And people were anxious about, you know, we should get together. And I said, well, here, why don't we go on a hike and then have lunch over at this other guy's house who's near where we're going to go for a hike. And so I invited him to come after it for lunch, you know, and that worked out fabulously, you know, and have barbecue. Our one of the guy that we're at the house we were at, he's just a great guy. And literally, we had the best French fries on the planet. They went from being in the ground to French fries in about 20 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
And like the first time we did that, this fellow Murray, I mean, I was sitting beside him and we have beer, and he was just, this is so wonderful. This
Yeah,
was before his
beautiful.
wife died. This was so, you know, I could just feel him. He was just saying, this is so wonderful. You know?
Sometimes it takes so little to include the excluded, right?
Yeah.
And it takes most of us looking for the opportunities, because we can get so fast, so busy, or just make decisions and we forget about somebody or we forget something. And all it would take is a simple slowing down and going, hey, and including someone. I did, Heidi, want us to come to before, because I noticed the time. we had, and I don't know if we've already kind of covered it, but you had some points around how to kind of identify, am I in a non-coherent way of relating, or am I in a coherent way of relating? Do you want to go over those?
Yeah, I think, we've touched on it basically, but if you look at where things went horribly wrong in relationship or got very painful, like what was your lead in behavior? Or it can be very specific or it can be general. So I'm going to give an example, like how, again, I like to define things in myself because that helps me show up where I need to show up with my own boundaries. So in looking at being in relationship, and this was maybe when I was in my early 20s, that I looked at the fact that I would always intrigue and flirt, and not making that wrong, but for me, if I was in relationship, which I was with my girl's dad from the time I was 17 till I was 32 or something like that. I wanted that attention. I wanted that hit. And I determined for myself, and again, no judgment if everyone's flirting and whatever, that's your own thing. For the reasons that I did it, I felt like I was showing up as available. And then if it went too far, it's like, oops, I'm not available because I'm not a cheater. And I chose that was a non-sober relationship behavior for me because it was dishonest, and dishonesty was something that happened in my childhood, daddy issues and hiding and all that. So that's just one example of that's like universal for me, is to keep my sexual energy to myself. And I have found that when I go outside that, it bites me, it bites me. So that's just one thing. And another one that I could share just as an example is codependency. And again, codependency is a broad term and everybody has their own behaviors in it. And for me, if I am giving something I don't have, I guess it all goes back to dishonesty for me. Because even in codependency, if I'm giving money, time, or energy that I honestly don't have to give to the other, instead of being honest that I don't have the money to give or I don't have the time to give, then that is a non-sober behavior for me. That's a way that I hurt myself and them in showing up when I really don't have it to show up, but I'm showing up at the cost of me for them. That's one of mine. And again, I'm not saying these should be yours. I just know those take me to non-coherent places in relationship. Those things may be fine for other people,
I have some tricky ones that are not real popular. They use this term called gaslighting. I call it flipping. So you have a beef with me and you're telling me something, and I'm pretty good at taking that, flipping it around where it's your fault, right? And it's a way that I defend myself, and rather than meeting the person with empathy and really listening, not getting defensive, not flipping it, not gaslighting them, making them wrong. And it's a really nasty one. It hurts other people really, really bad. And in reality, I end up hurting because it creates division, it pushes us further apart. And I still notice it when I'm really challenged or really triggered, or I feel like someone's really coming at me with a lot of aggression. I can get real bossy. I'm right, you're wrong. And at the worst, I can start flipping it. And then the other one that happens for me when I notice is where I know I'm avoiding you. They call it ghosting. For me, it's just like I'm walling you out. And I know enough now to know that when that energy's there, I actually need to have a conversation and need to come in and work to resolve the issue and not flip it, and just be present, empathetic, listening, seek to understand, really take in what is there for me to learn and grow, and not take in, because this is also something I do, it's a codependent tendency, take it in and take it personally. And now I'm down that hole of I'm a bad person and it's never going to work out and I'm going to be left alone. And that's my childhood origin story, right? So we can look at all kinds of things. Heidi's sharing some concrete ones. I'm sharing some that are a little bit more difficult to get our hands on sometimes. And I think we all have both, like, people who, hey, I'm in your neighborhood, can I stop by? I'm rarely here. 2 days later, hey, I'm in your neighborhood. Can I stop by? I'm rarely here. And that goes on 8 times in 12 days. Well, of course you're stalking the person, right? You're like never in their neighborhood, but you're texting them. I mean, red flag. Or just a text, you don't get anything back. Another text, you don't get anything back. Another text, and they're escalating, right? Why are they ignoring me? And in reality, the person dropped their phone or lost it, or it's wet, or some other reason. But our storytelling is going off. So I think there's lots. You could probably think of a few. Anybody want to share some that they know?
Before we jump in, we would like you guys to self-identify with something. And the reason for doing that is I'm going to give you the 3 A's. So you can write these down if you want. And this is the reason. It's not to bring up shame. So the acronym for shame is should have already mastered everything. So we don't look at these things to have shame on us. We look at these things to show up more coherently so we can actually receive what we want and need rather than push it away. And so self-identifying, here's my steps. Awareness is the first day. We must become aware of what we're doing, and that's what we're doing right now. So we're asking you guys to become aware of one thing you can share with us so that you're aware of it and you name it to tame it. And the second awareness is acceptance. So this is what Paul brought up so lovely today. We don't push it away. We don't shame ourselves. We don't hate that we have it. We're tender. Okay, I accept that right now I'm pissed that my partner left for 30 days and I'm hurt and I feel so personal about it and it is devastating and heartbreaking. So we accept that that is okay, that is what we're triggered into, that's how we're feeling, that's, whatever state we're in, we find acceptance around it. And only when we have acceptance, we can coherently look at the third A, which is action. What action are we going to take once we're aware and once we have accepted our true state of being and what's underneath and why is it happening? How are we going to act? So we have that pause before we act. What do we need? And how is the strategy I want to react with going to meet that, or is it not? So awareness, acceptance, action. Now you guys tell on yourselves one thing you're aware of.
I don't know if this hits the nail on the head, but I forgot who said it at the moment, but it reminded me that one of the actions I go into when I'm triggered is that I start to feel like not considered or disrespected or something. And so once I'm triggered because I'm labeling somebody else's behavior, what happens to me is I go on this spiral of just thinking of all the different scenarios that the other person could have been doing, and to reinforce my feeling of being unconsidered. So I don't know if that's nailing it, but it seems like it could be so much more simple if I didn't do that. And so I'm wondering, I could see how awareness, acceptance, action could go in that. So like maybe just saying, okay, I'm triggered here. This is where all my mind's going. It's leading down that incoherent way with my.
So I would love to offer this, and you can take it or leave it, but I love to name things to tame it, because then I know that, right. Oh, that's that behavior. I don't need to do that. So right. I would say, I would call that, if with the awareness of looking for evidence. You know your trigger, you know what it's triggering, and you could call that behavior. Okay, that's my behavior when I look for evidence to stab my wound more. I'm looking for evidence that this is true. Yeah. And then accepting that that part of you that's looking for evidence is stabbing the wound deeper. It's making it bigger. So it might be a non-coherent way of coping with a very real trigger that came up. So the action would be to go back to being kind and compassionate with the trigger, noticing, taking action of staying away from that behavior that leads you down the rabbit hole, which is looking for more evidence that it's true. that they're doing that to me, or they're hurting me, or whatever it is. And then the action can be different each time. It can be being with yourself and doing some writing about it, can be calling a friend and saying, I want to start looking for evidence. So can we look for evidence to the contrary together? Or, and what is the need you have right then in that tender place? Do you need to know that you're important? Do you need to know that you're loved? And can you reach out for that from your partner, from somebody else, or from yourself? So, I mean, there's a lot of different actions, right? But the kind of stop it in its tracks is identifying, okay, when I look for evidence, it gets worse. So what can I do to be with myself, not dismiss it, but what action can I take, which would take me down another path?
When you were sharing, Noelani, it reminds me of thought patterns, thought processes that I can get into, which I call the what if mind. And they're usually based on past soft or hard trauma experiences. And then I project them out onto the current situation and predict the worst case scenario. Usually it's this part of me that I call grumpy grandpa, or my general. They're kind of the same guy that thinks he's got it all figured out, can predict the future, and seeks evidence, like Heidi was talking about, from the past, usually, maybe the current situation, to predict, oh, I'm going to get hurt again. The same outcome's going to happen again. Da, 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 da. And what I've noticed is, oh, I've been down this alley, this dark alley, and entered this haunted house. And I've been in every room in this haunted house so many times. And I'm catching myself more now. Oh, I'm about to walk down the alley. I know where I'm going. I'm going to that haunted house. I don't need to go there. That never gets me anywhere I want to go. Let's go and just be right here, as she is saying, right here where I am now. And then, as you so beautifully pointed out, what am I feeling? What's happening? What's the need that's not being met? And then seeking a healthy way, or a sober way, or a coherent way to get that need met. But for me, it's just noticing that my mind's seeking evidence, that my mind's predicting that the pandemic will continue into 3034, right? Hundreds of years from now, we'll be wearing masks still. I mean, that's where my stuff goes. And just, that's really not helpful. That's that dark alley. What's going on, Timothy? Oh, I'm scared that I'm never going to be able to go dance again.
Yeah.
And I really want to dance.
Bring in a lot of self-awareness, and then acceptance, and then the action is that crossroads of the haunted house. Cool. Thank you. Thank you both.
I love a good pause. Anybody else want to go?
Well, I will then. Yeah, thanks, Noelani. I can identify with that. I can go into, would this be something, Heidi, like, because I can have that avoidant aspect, even though I'm wanting the connection. And then I'll just kind of start just accepting, like this term, accepting crumbs. And somehow that is enough to kind of keep me going, because it also keeps me safe, but doesn't keep me happy in the long run. Then it's like I can go into, I never get enough. It's never enough, right? From accepting crumbs to like it's never enough aspect. So you're muted, love. You're muted, honey.
We can't hear you, Heidi. It's
Sorry.
good though. I can tell
Thank you.
from the facial expression.
It's good I'm muted. You can read my mind. I love that you already named it. I would call it accepting crumbs, right? That's a behavior doesn't take you where you want to go in relationship. So that's the awareness, is that one, you do it, two, that it doesn't give you what you want. So the acceptance around that is maybe going a little deeper. And I think with avoidance, often what's underneath is fear. Afraid of intimacy, I mean, essentially, but what is it that's triggering you in this person? So maybe getting smaller, because we could go really broad with it, but in the particular situation where you are aware that this is being triggered, what is being triggered from that person that kicks you into the avoidance? and then your reaction to it, which if we go with Nolani, her reaction was to look for evidence. Yours is to just settle for crumbs. And that's a way to pull back into your avoidance. So that's the reaction you want to defer away from. So really getting to the trigger of what's coming up, what's triggering you into the avoidance, and then what does that avoidant need to come back out and play, or to ask for what it needs, or to not be afraid to let go of somebody because they can't show up for that. I mean, there's a lot there, obviously, but is that helpful?
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
For me, Anna Prava, it's when I'm doing the crumbs game, it's a story inside of me that I'm not good enough, and I don't deserve what I want. And so I do settle for less. And it's usually not that the other person can't give it to me. It's that I don't ask for it. I don't represent my worth. And sometimes it's I'm choosing people who really are not capable of meeting me in the abundance that I want to be met in. And so I've had to do a lot of just really examining, where did this not good enough thing come from, and healing all of that, as you know, and I know you well enough to know you're doing all of that. And then the hardest part has been advocating for myself kindly, not in an avoidant or anxious way, but in a secure, okay, here I go. This is my need. These are my values. I'm representing it, and I'm doing it, with some flexibility and some grace, as opposed to grumpy grandpa telling everybody to shut up, or scared little Timothy kind of like holding back, and really working to be present. And I find sometimes in my life, it's gotten easier to just go, well, I just don't want it anymore. And that's not true. But I just, like you said, sometimes I go, well, I'm just going to be alone, or I'm just going to be this way, right? And it's like a way of masking my pain.
And that's skipping the acceptance, right? Of not accepting that you have a need. Because
first,
it's
just
easier to
accepting
just
that
dismiss it.
First accepting, I tell myself I'm not good enough. I represent that I'm not good enough. And then I settle for not good enough. Just accepting I do this. This is me, not everybody else. It's me. And then, yeah, where's that coming from? The healing of that emotionally. And then coming to where Heidi's talking about, this kind of further down the road of, hey, I have this need, and now I'm reverse engineering, and I get to represent it. I am worth this, and I'm going to discern and choose people who can meet me in that need so I can have success. Otherwise, I repeat the same process as we talked about, that same dark alley and back into that haunted house over and over.
Paul actually really helped me with that on a Prava, because I was in a space of like, I have too much needs. My needs are too big and nobody's ever going to be able to meet them, and I got to get rid of these needs. And Paul, when I was on the mainland this year, actually helped me like, yeah, we have needs. That's why we're in relationship, and it's okay. And I had to go back to that acceptance piece. Like, can I accept that I really need these things in relationship?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Also for me too, is really inspiring with Paul, right? That yes, I have needs, and not to be need shamed. And I think because of this, I have been, tracking this particular relationship and looking at my feelings and needs and bringing them out, right? And being more courageous in that aspect, right? And so that's been really powerful as a way of practicing. COVID has also kind of put a little wrench in that aspect, because the COVID thing, people can be in relationship, be on totally different pages with COVID. And then you've got to make your decisions, right? The anti-vax, anti-mask. If the other people, and that's another thing. If my partner happened to be on the opposite side of where I am, and then, for example, I have kids. I've got to make a decision. I have to choose wisely. I can't make stupid mistakes. I can't, things can happen, but I have to do as much as possible to stay alive for my children. I'm single, they rely on me. They're the more important than the partner, really. So, yeah. That's been hard. That's been a lot of sadness and acceptance around that.
We are nearing the end. We've got about 10 minutes, and I'd like to just open it up to any questions or asks, or kind of, we've been doing pretty loose today because of the numbers. It's been nice. I really feel that the level of intimacy it's been feeding me just to get to be with some people I know. And then David and Noelani, it's been a real pleasure to get to be with you. But any questions or reflections? Thanks, Heidi, for putting your information in there.
We're putting our information in the chat box if you want to reach out to either of us. Both of us offer 30-minute strategy or clarity sessions, and that is complimentary. So please take us up on that. We'll spend some time with you and kind of look at what you may want to work on and see if we're fit and get you pointed in the right direction, whether it's with us or somebody else.
I'll just say a couple of things. I quite like what these little sort of metaphors that I've heard, like going to the dark alley to the haunted house and knowing all the rooms in the haunted house. That's a really I don't know, powerful metaphor for me. And Heidi on naming to tame and your acronym for shame. Let's see. I was going to share something. I kind of forget right now. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing about needs that I'm coming to, and I've actually, it's just been this a bit of awareness that's come up just in the last couple of days, really, with my relationship with my wife Connie, who has been on a couple of these calls here with me. There's like really looking out for what her needs are when she's communicating with me. So I'm just listening beyond that. Like I often think, I feel like I'm being mothered and micromanaged, you know, and it triggers me like hugely. So and then me getting defensive, and I'm working on.
What need are you, or what are you noticing is her intention when she's doing that? Are you able to like listen, you know, get past the trigger, listen to what's her intention? What's her driving force behind micromanaging you and nurturing you and mothering you?
Yeah, I mean, this is really, I mean, after like many years together, you know, I'm literally just sort of coming to this in the last few days. So it's sort of, I feel I'm almost embarrassed that it would take this long. But as I said, I shouldn't be ashamed. I shouldn't have already mastered this, I guess. But one thing that I did start to do a while ago, like would I talk to my grandchildren like that? Like on the other hand, yeah, just sort of being with, you know.
What is your reaction to it? Maybe we'll ask that ahead of this question. How do you react to it when she does that?
I get angry. I feel a lack of trust. You know, I know that's not a feeling, but
Yeah, it's something you tell yourself, that she doesn't trust me.
Yeah, like you know, I'm an adult. You know, I got my, you know, if it's say we're driving, it's like, yeah, I did get my drive. I'm 72 years old. I did get my driver's license when I was 16.
So that's kind of like giving her that comment. Is that what you're saying? You might say something like that. So that is a
get off my back.
What would you call that? Like sarcasm or a dig? Give a little dig.
Yeah, and it's really a lot of defensiveness. But as I've just sort of come, like literally, just even just this morning, like I thought, you know, I've got a little bit of separation. And asking what myself, what need is she getting met? And even asking the question, not necessarily knowing the answer, but it gives me a bit of compassion for her, you know, empathy for her. And I mean, I this whole text bombing thing, I didn't mean is a new word for me, but I can.
Text
But
bombing.
I must admit, it's not a sin that I've really committed. I don't think, because I don't do most of my textings are pretty
So
plain Jane information based. So it's just a thing to avoid. I can, and I love Paul's little poem that he put out. I mean, I interpreted it as a poem. I thought that was great. I almost kind of think I'll cut and paste it. But just I mean, literally, just in the last couple of days, I have been able to kind of look at it as she's getting some need met, and I'm getting some need unmet. I don't know what they are, but to try to.
I've spent a lot of time being in the dynamic that you're describing, David. And
Mhm.
for me, having a single mom and grandmother and aunts, a lot of women,
Yeah.
when a woman who loves me starts trying to tell me what to do, that's how I perceive it, or micromanage me, or worse, is actually saying you're doing this wrong, you need to do it this way. What triggers in me is years of being micromanaged as a boy and being basically told, don't turn into your father. This is my stuff. And so it gets my hackles up. I get defensive. I want to basically, same things you say come up for me. I know what I'm doing. I'm 50 years old. I've been on the planet this long. I can do all this. Why are you doing that? And as I've gotten better at just accepting that's my stuff and listening, and then with Scott Thomas's help and this Love Coach Academy's help, really getting curious with people. What is it that you're saying? What is it that you would like? Why are you asking me to um, do this at this point in this way? And often by being curious, they'll start telling me more, and I start to realize that what really is behind it is their need to care for me, that they're really showing me care. And then it's easier for me to just listen, and then I make my choice. Am I going to do that or not? Or am I going to do it my way or their way? And it kind of keeps me out of, so I'm working both angles. I'm working my stuff, my past, and I'm seeking to understand what is it that they want to communicate at a deeper level and go below the, hey, could you put the toilet seat down? You know.
So I'm going to jump in for a second just to work it through the awareness, acceptance, action, because like Timothy's talking about the action, like that's the action to show up. But if we back up and look at your awareness, being aware that it triggers you, being aware that the reaction you're having is anger or sending little digs or whatever you want to call it. I'm naming things. I want you to name it yourself, but you named anger. So that's the looking at the awareness of what it brings up in you. The acceptance is, okay, I feel angry. It's triggering me what? And that's what Timothy kind of asked you, like, what story do you tell yourself? You know, does she think I don't know what story you tell yourself, but does she think I'm stupid? She's a micromanager. She's whatever comes up for you. That's like kind of identifying the acceptance of what is being triggered in you and what is coming up for you. And then looking at your behavior, because that's what we're talking about right now. Your behavior takes you someplace you don't want to go. So if you react in anger or sending out a little comment, I call it baiting or button pushing comment, it probably doesn't get you what you're wanting from her. So that's the behavior we want to veer away from. And so then looking into actions, what are the other behaviors instead of reacting in that way, which was the normal reaction, especially if you've been together for a lot of years. So then you can go into the actions of getting curious with her, looking at something else, maybe looking at what you need from her or how she could approach you differently to meet your need so that you're not triggered, you know, looking at what would help you not be triggered. How could she approach you with things in a way that would be not triggering? And again, that's a whole lot in a little amount of time, but running it through the system so you can kind of think through that. what other behavior could you take to meet a need? And we didn't identify your need, but probably need to be talked to in a different way, I would imagine. And women tend to do that. We tend to be critical because we're wanting something else, and it never works. That's a behavior we can get away from, is not asking for things by telling you what we don't like. It's a very poor strategy, I've found.
Damn. I was hoping that would work for me.
Well, sometimes I've seen
Timothy,
it.
you're muted.
So some of it has come through where I can say that she's really there's different ones, so like but some of it is as if she's seeing me not being as powerful as I could be, and sort of selling out, like then it really gets me, because it's sort of like, I mean, she's right, I should be, I said I was going to go do a workout or gets, look after my physical being better, and she'll see me hunched over my computer and not having a good posture. I mean, I know she's fucking right, and
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
and then that really gets me, because it's sort of me punching myself too. I'm not being the man I wanted to be,
ultimately she's saying she cares about you, right, at the
Yeah.
deepest level, in a way, in my view, and she's triggering things, and part of you knows she's right. That's the worst, when we know that the other's right. We've got to wrap it up, but Anna Parava posted in the chat box that on Wednesdays, and it's really good, and she's been holding down the fort for the Wednesday Love Coach Academy Empathy Practice Group, and it's where we don't get sidetracked and move into all these different nuances like we've been doing today, but we really stay with empathy and practicing empathy. And it's such a good muscle for all of us to work on, to have. I know I need constant reminders that empathy first, as Scott says, is the golden rule, because I often move to wanting to fix or analyze or deconstruct or some other form that is not empathy. And empathy really is that thing, I believe, that brings us closer together, as Anna Prava was talking about, with her partner being on one side of the vaccine and her being on the other. It's empathy that brings us, we don't have to agree, it brings us closer together. So that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find that through Love Coach Academy. And go ahead, Noelani.
Thank you so much. I'll make it quick. It's been on my radar for a while now, the Wednesdays Empathy Group. However, I have something, a commitment, hula, an hour after it starts. So I'm just curious. I've been curious about it. So if I were to show up, is it appropriate to leave early?
Yes. Yeah, you can come in for empathy practice. The doors out, Zoom room's always open. You will be admitted, no matter what time you come or no, what time. And oftentimes depending on if Scott has another class at 7 or a client at 7:30, we often will even go later till 8, so
like usually maybe even a 2-hour thing.
It is sometimes, not all the time, but it can be. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would love to join at some point. I don't want to interrupt or be the rude one to leave early, but
don't worry about interrupting. It's, don't worry about that. Be the rude one. Just come in when you can, leave if you need to.
It's such a beautiful structure. You'll be able to just come in, start listening. And if you can make the beginning of at least one or two, they'll talk about, almost every time, talk about how we teach empathy, how we practice it. And that way, once you have that understanding, which I think you already do, you can just jump in, leave whenever, and witness, participate. It's really good.
Cool.
Yeah, in the beginning, we do talk about empathy. What is empathy? Examples of empathy, of how to give empathy, right? And not what some examples of non-empathetic responses are, but it really is available for however you want to be there. So
I have to jump in really quick. I'm so sorry, you guys. I have to jump off. I have to drive and get somewhere by 9:30. I'm so appreciative that you all came. It's been lovely being with you, and I'm sorry that I have to end it. I'm one of those people that would stay on all day if I could. I wasn't able to book it that way. So many
Thank you
blessings.
so much. We appreciate you.
Bye,
taking the
Heidi.
time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Heidi.
See you
Bye, Heidi.
soon.
Aloha.
Mahalo, Heidi.
Hello. I'm going to have to leave as well and stop. Go ahead, Heidi. Bye. Can Paul or Anaprava, do I stop the recording and it'll all be good before I
Yes.
close the room, right?
First, stop the recording and then
All right,
close.
I'm going to stop the recording now, but we're still on the room. I'm just stopping it. Goodbye, Facebook or YouTube.
Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. I